Viewers, welcome back to the Personal Injury Law Show. Before the break, we're talking about surveillance and how it interacts with our society and impacts on injured workers. At the moment, the state of Victorian law is in a bit of a flux. The law requires us to disclose all medical reports that we rely on. We've got to exchange them between ourselves, that is the injured party and the insurer. But when it comes to surveillance videos and tapes, the insurer's not obliged to hand them over. The Court of Appeal in Victoria has refused to enforce the worker's right to get those tapes. Now, Alice, tell us a bit more about the state of the law in theory.
In theory, Tony, despite what you've just said, it's really frustrating as a compensation lawyer when you can't get access to things like surveillance, because unlike the other side, the insurance company or the defendant, we don't get the chance to send surveillance tapes of what our client's been up to our doctors for comment. You know, can they do this in light of what they're supposed to be complaining about or what their injury is? Furthermore, though, I think it's really interesting because according to IPP number 3, or part of the Information Privacy Act regulations, there is a theoretical right in terms of people like our clients to know when you're going to
you're being watched
or when someone's going to conduct surveillance on you. In particular, where a Victorian public sector organisation such as WorkSafe Victoria in workers' compensation, for example, wishes to use surveillance, it should ensure that it gives appropriate notice in accordance with IPP 1.3.
Professor, it doesn't happen in real life.
It doesn't happen in real life, and that's because the information privacy legislation is quite weak. So these information privacy principles tend to work more as a code than as a set of legal requirements.
Tony, look, it's really frustrating because I've yet to ever run a case where I've found out before the fact that my client will be under surveillance, and we don't ever get a chance to find out about it. In fact, they don't even have to tell us if they're going to use it in court. And these types of tapes... It's like
Alice,
an ambush.
It's an ambush.
That's right.
I've been to the Court of Appeal twice to try and get surveillance tapes out of the insurer. You know that they're surveillance tapes because you get their action printout, which sets out where they've spent the money, and it tells you that they've had surveillance. Yeah. But the insurer's entitled to hand it over if they feel like it, and if they don't, they ambush you. Now, Professor, it's important that if you've got surveillance on a particular person, it might be for 1 minute or 10 minutes, it's got to be put into perspective, surely, because it's only a small part of the person's entire life.
Sure, absolutely. But what puzzles me about the Court of Appeal decisions is that there's a basic principle of natural justice, which is that you're entitled to obtain access to all of the evidence that is relevant to the resolution of your case before a court. And so I'm somewhat dismayed by the fact that there's been a decision that evidence of a surveillance kind does not need to be disclosed. I can't really understand that.
Well, they do disclose it when they feel like it, Alice, and you've encountered that on quite a few occasions.
I have, yes. They do disclose it when they feel like it. Sometimes before you get to court, or if you're having a mediation or even a discussion with the other side, they do choose to say, by the way, we've conducted surveillance. You never find out about it beforehand, I must say, but you sometimes find out about it after it's been done, but before we actually get to court, and they'll say, well, look, we think your client's going nowhere based on this surveillance we have, and sometimes they catch your client doing things that admittedly they shouldn't be doing. But furthermore, there's a lot of tension in this area, because if you look at something like the Victorian Charter of Rights and Responsibilities, a piece of theoretical legislation that's been enforced for nearly 4 years in this state, there's no original right to sue under this legislation.
That's correct.
You can only add it on if you have a cause of action under some other kind of law, okay? So you can't actually say, well, I'm going to use the Charter to start up some kind of test case to try and get hold of surveillance. So there's very little help out there despite a theoretical right to the information in the first place.
Professor, the Charter of Human Rights in relation to surveillance doesn't really help us, but it seems to be helping a lot of people that are charged under criminal law.
Charter of Rights is still in its early days, Tony, and we don't have too many important cases interpreting its provisions. But what Alice has just said is absolutely right. The Charter doesn't allow you to take an action against a public authority on the ground that that public authority has breached your human rights.
Because
you have to have another action on foot to which the privacy matter is relevant.
And then you seek to rely on the Charter.
Seek to rely on the Charter.
That's correct.
But it makes it very, very difficult for people actually to take action about this particular breach of human rights. And there's another point here of some interest, and that is that at the Commonwealth level, you might be aware, the federal government has launched an inquiry into whether we should, in Australia, have a statutory tort of privacy. Now that seems to me an important initiative. The government seems, at present at least, to be committed to that. And if we do have a separate independent statutory tort of privacy, and quite a number of the problems that we are talking about now may well dissipate.
And just on that issue there, Alice, I don't think the states will be able to agree on what the statute should say in terms of the various elements to the statute.
Yeah, look, I think that's true, Tony, and look, it's a really fraught area. And getting back to what you said before, quite often you get a surveillance video in court 12, 13, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes long. But quite often, unless you actually do something about it, the court doesn't find out that the investigators have conducted upwards of 20 hours of surveillance.
And they're not obliged to give you the 20 hours.
No, and
all they have to do in court,
yeah.
Professor, is they have to admit that they've done 20 hours of surveillance, but they don't have to hand it over. So in that 17 minutes that they haven't given you, if they've only given you 3, there could be 17 minutes which shows your client displaying the levels of disability associated with their claim.
That's right. And look, this cherry-picking exercise, it's really difficult as a plaintiff solicitor to help the court see the context of the surveillance. And this surveillance can topple your case in more ways than
That's
one.
exactly right.
Well, it still seems to me a denial of procedural fairness.
It is.
And on that ground, one ought to be able to challenge it in the higher court, it would seem to me.
Might be a way of getting to the Court of Appeal again, I think.
Well, Court of Appeal.
And Griffiths and Rose is an interesting case, Alice. Can you give me the basic facts of this?
Yes, Tony, look, basically Mr Griffiths, he worked for a government agency. Ironically, he was also, just as a side note, part of the Information Technology Subcommittee, and he had signed a policy regarding use of the internet at work because he was afforded the use of a laptop computer from work as part of his job. But he chose one day at home to use the work laptop to view pornography, and the employer had conducted some internet surveillance of the use of his computer, and even though he was using his own internet connection, he was using a work computer, and the employer was able to discover that he'd looked at the pornography, which was contrary to the policy.
Professor, the employer engaged this logging system called Spectre 360, which meant that without him knowing, it's actually doing a random check of his computer to see if it's being used appropriately. And he was going into pornography sites.
Yeah.
Do you think that's correct?
Look, the general rule here is that if you're using information technology equipment that belongs to your employer, whether in the public sector, then you can only use that computer for approved purposes. Now here, this person was given notice that he might be, his internet use might be watched. In those circumstances, it was simply foolish of him to use the work computer,
Professor,
even though he was using a private internet connection.
We'll come back to this after the sponsors break. We've got to go to a sponsors break, viewers. We won't be going to the mailbag because we're fortunate to get the Professor on the show tonight. So please stay tuned and we'll be back shortly.